Howdy, y'all. It's Christine Niles night. She made a nice little video with Rose Sweet and talked all about divorce and annulment or that type of thing. Her main problem, though, that I wanted to respond to was that she effectively says marriage is private, as in the contract, the living together part can be adjudicated or is under the authority of the spouse rather than the church, which is a heresy. I'll get to that in a little bit, but I just want to play through some of her stuff and then we can kind of respond to it. I'll just do the best I can, but like I said, she doesn't respond to me. If I say too much, I don't want to get blocked. So I wanted to make a little video instead. And I may talk a little about Rose Sweet. She's a whole other topic here. Let's see what we got.
I'm Christine Niles. There are a lot of misconceptions floating around about divorce among Catholics.
That's for sure.
And I wanted to clear up some of those misconceptions and also later on in the show, speak with Rose Sweet, who has authored several books on divorce, especially finding healing after the heartbreak of divorce.
Okay.
This is a
P.S. The annulment healing thing is another way of saying relieve my conscience, because people have the sin of divorce, but you can't get rid of the sin just by getting the annulment. It's still there. Let's go.
Topic that isn't very pleasant for Catholics. I think a lot of Catholics don't really want to talk about it, but you'd be surprised how many Catholics have been through divorce. How many Catholics?
Okay, tons of Catholics have been stupid. All right.
Or either
here we go.
They've gone through and gotten decree of nullity, perhaps gotten remarried, or they've ever gotten remarried and are single parents.
Right.
But it's important to be able to address this group of people's needs too, because they do exist in the church and probably
their needs are just live your vows. Go ahead.
Probably in greater numbers than you think. And right off the bat, I should just make clear, nobody wants divorce. Nobody's promoting divorce as a good thing. In fact, divorce is a tragedy. You know, it has effects, ripple effects, and the people most harmed are always the children, always.
Right.
So but there are some, we live in a broken world, and there are some people who find themselves in that situation, either through their own fault or perhaps through no fault of their own. 2384 of the Catechism, this is referring to sacramentally valid marriages.
Okay, so here's what her first problem is. She's talking about how divorce is a sin, but it's referring to sacramentally valid marriages. That's what she says. Every marriage is sacramentally valid. So you can't do the autopsy while the person is still alive, and you can't divorce while the marriage is valid, and they're all valid until proven otherwise. But what they do is they say, I don't think my marriage is valid, therefore my divorce doesn't count. So here we go.
It says, divorce is a grave offense against the natural law. It claims to break the contract to which the spouses freely consented. Again.
All right. P.S. It's not it is a contract. A contract and a covenant, when you're talking about marriage, are the same thing. It's a solemn contract. The reason they say covenant is because they want to avoid the rights and duties part, which is why divorce is unjust. Here.
This is involving true and actual consent.
True and actual consent. If you said I do to permanence, babies, and fidelity, exclusivity, that is, it's consent. That's all you need. All the problem here is, and the reason why we're even here talking about this is because Vatican II injected love into the legal definition. That's where all the confusion is. It's got no definite. You can't define what's being consented to anymore, which is why it's all a matter of the heart here.
To live with each other until death. Divorce does injury to the covenant of salvation, of which sacramental marriage is the sign.
Yeah, it does injury to the covenant of salvation. Okay, but it doesn't do injury to the marriage. Isn't a, like I said, it's a contract and it's a covenant. It's the same thing. Okay. You got to watch that word sign. A sign is not legal. A sign is a significance.
Contracting a new union, even if it is recognized by civil law, adds to the gravity of the rupture. The remarried spouse is then in a situation of public and permanent adultery.
And also the divorced spouse is in a situation of public adultery, because divorce is a form of adultery, just divorce itself. Matthew 19:9, and it's Cornelius a Lapide commentary. That's what Matt. So if you put away an innocent spouse, you're guilty of adultery. Here we go.
So the Catholic Church teaches that if you are in a sacramentally valid marriage, and you divorce and then you get remarried, you're actually committing adultery.
Yeah, like I said, just the divorce alone, Christine, is adultery.
You're committing adultery. And people in those situations need to get right with God.
Yeah, live your state in life.
Obviously depends on your particular situation, but what you need to do is you really need to go talk to your parish priest.
I wouldn't do that.
Get right with God.
No, because they'll say get an annulment instead of honor your vows, because marriage is just love, and that's what they do. If you're not living with your spouse, there's no love in the room, so they just blow it off.
The situation, depending on what the circumstances are. But immediately, of course, living a chaste life, you cannot engage in sexual relations if you are indeed remarried from a prior sacramentally valid marriage. 2385 says divorce is immoral also because it introduces disorder into the family and into society. Again, referring to sacramentally valid marriages.
Which is all of them. Hello.
Disorder brings grave harm to the deserted spouse, to children traumatized by the separation of their parents, and often torn between them.
Yeah, it's built in parental alienation.
And because of its contagious effect, which makes it truly a plague on society.
Newsflash. Annulment is a plague on society. It's just as much of a plague as divorce. And Rose Sweet is the queen of annulments, and she's spreading the plague. She doesn't tell people to honor their vows when there's a possibility of the annulment. That's one way of putting it. Anyway, here we go.
So divorce is not a good thing. Once you've taken that vow, it is for life. It is until death do us part. It's what people say in their vows. And how many people actually mean it when they say
Everybody does. Everybody means it, basically. Yeah.
2383 of the Catechism
does be juicy.
However, talk about legitimate situations where separation is allowed. It says the separation of spouses while maintaining the marriage bond can be legitimate in certain cases provided for by canon law.
Okay, yes, the separation of spouses can be legitimate. That means legal, obviously. And canon law says that due process must be observed because, oh, hang on a sec. Come on in here, Doug. I'm going to shut the door. Due process must be observed because marriage has essential rights and duties, okay? That means justice. That's Canon 1152.2, I think. Excuse me, Canon 1095.2. Anyway, here, let's go.
And the Code of Canon Law says on this, if either the spouses causes grave mental or physical danger to the other spouse or to the offspring, or otherwise renders common life too difficult, that spouse gives the other a legitimate cause for leaving.
Warning, Will Robinson. That's totally true. Okay, so this is all based on Matthew 19:9. To put away a spouse except for fornication, that means if they commit adultery, that means if they stray, whatever. So you cannot put away a spouse unless they commit adultery or fornication. And the church has interpreted that to mean the same thing that's Canon 1153 right there. If they cheat on you or if they render common life too difficult, they like to communicate with a 5-iron, as I say, something like that, then that gives the spouse legitimate cause for leaving. But that's not the end of the story. This is very important. I'm going to put something on the screen to give the rest of the story. Hang on, let me push pause here. Okay, so here you go, you guys. I wanted to talk about what she was discussing, this Canon 1153. This is what hinges the entire, this is the big loophole. 1153 is the loophole which transfers marriage from public to private, like Hollywood wants. By the way, I did ask Christine Niles once if divorce is a public or a private sin, and she correctly answered it is a public sin, which means that you need the public authority to grant your separation. That would be the local ordinary or the bishop, and that's why they have this due process. You can't have your rights removed without due process, and that's why there must be the ecclesiastical judgment. So let's read Canon 1153. Let's figure this out. All right. Yes, per Matthew 19:9, that's where it comes from. If either spouse causes grave mental or physical danger, by the way, 1152 up here says if it's adultery, that's permanent. But 1153 is if they, like I said, they communicate with the golf club or whatever, that's temporary, and you can leave. That's a legitimate cause, either by decree of the local ordinary. That means you have to get permission from the bishop, or on their own authority if there is danger and delay. This is the part you cut out. If there's danger and delay of getting the decree by the local ordinary. So if you got to get out of the house because it's on fire, quote unquote, you can do so, but you have to do the due process. So they call it due process. Canon Law 87 says no bishop can dispense with that due process. So let's go back to 1152. Okay, so let's say you have it. Look, you can't separate because that's what wedlock is. You cannot separate unless grave cause or legitimate cause, and then it must be done with due process, not private. It's not a private matter, okay? So Canon 1152.2, this is important. Okay, blah, 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 blah. If the spouse observed, wait, no, hang on a second. Okay, if the 1152.3, if the innocent spouse has severed conjugal living voluntarily, that's what people do who want to get the divorce because they think their marriage isn't valid or whatever they want to do, or they're feeling like I'm feeling abused and all this stuff, you know. Okay, so then they bail, all right? And they'll say, I'm innocent, groovy. The innocent spouse has severed conjugal living voluntarily. The spouse is to introduce a cause for separation within 6 months to the competent ecclesiastical authority. Later in the video, Christine Niles talks about how you just can you can talk to someone trusted or whatever. No, you can't, Christine. That is anathema per Canon 12 of the Council of Trent, which says every separation must be by ecclesiastical judgment. I'll probably find that on the screen too here. Anyway, which after having investigated all the circumstances, that means separation court. A no-fault court today happens in a public building. This is supposed to be a fault court, which happens in the church. That's who controls the sacrament of marriage, is the church. Christine Niles is talking about her misunderstandings about marriage and divorce. This is it, okay? And is to consider carefully, the judge, the bishop, the local ordinary, is to consider carefully whether the innocent spouse can be moved to forgive it. Okay, yeah. Anyway, so you get the decree, and then, okay, in all cases, that's not some, all cases when the cause for separation ceases, that means after having investigated all the circumstances, the bishop investigates, not your mom, not your neighbor, not your conscience, the bishop. Then when he decides and explains and labels the cause of the separation, it's because your husband communicates with a 5-iron, or your wife is going sideways in a serious way and, just doing weird stuff or whatever, or she's communicating with a 5-iron, I don't know. That once the bad spouse says, okay, time out, I give up, I am going to amend my ways, okay, then conjugal living must be restored. That's because marriage is wedlock and divorce breaks the contract. Divorce is just a separation. You can have imperfect and perfect divorce, okay? There's 2 kinds of divorces. The only kind that Catholics can have, aside from Petrine privilege and Pauline privilege, would be an imperfect divorce, which is the physical separation, because they're married till death. So you've got to keep it together because of you got to keep the bodies together because of justice, because marriage is the right to the conjugal act. That's it. Okay. Until hang on. So let's go back to where we were. Oh shoot, I gotta change this screen here. We're gonna share this tab instead. All right, here. Let's listen to what she says.
Okay. Grave mental or physical danger. That spouse or otherwise renders common life too difficult. That spouse gives the other legitimate cause for leaving. Obviously, that has to be determined on a case-by-case basis, hopefully in consultation with very, very trusted family, friends, your parish priest. Obviously, when it talks.
Warning, that's exactly right. Case by case basis. Everyone has the separation must be judged. If you do not get it judged, you're an abandoner. I don't care how innocent you may be. You're a public abandoner if you do not get your separation judged. And it must be done within 6 months. So you could be guilty as heck or the innocent spouse, but you are 100% publicly guilty if you don't get the public trial started within 6 months. And if your bishop says we don't do separation cases, then you have to publicly let everybody know you're trying to do the separation case. You're not deciding you have the authority to separate because I said so. I know I'm abused. No, it must be proven. If you separate, you're guilty until proven innocent. If you are the divorcee, if you're the one who does not separate, you're innocent until proven guilty. Got to remember that. Every divorce has one innocent spouse and one guilty spouse. There's no gray area on that. Hit it, Christine.
Talks about rendering common life too difficult. We don't mean because we can't agree on the temperature of the house, or because
every couple agrees on the temperature of the house. I don't know what she's talking about.
Car, I wanted a black car, obviously
And a
not
black
referring
car,
to
yo.
things like that. And that's usually not the reasons why people end up separating. Usually there's some sort of grave mental, emotional, physical abuse, possibly sexual abuse. I think it's important that in such situations, people refrain from judgment because you simply do.
Okay. She's going on and on about this judgment stuff. Oh, you publicly judge it. If somebody is doing something manifest, public, you judge it as, okay, so you are a public abandoner, and I can judge you as such if you do not have a separation decree. You're a public adulterer, and I can judge you as such if you are living in public adultery, as in married by the state and all that good stuff. You're a public adult. I can judge that. I can judge if it's raining outside. I don't have by observation. Okay, that's all that is. But she's saying that that your separation is private. Baloney. That's Protestant because they don't have any bishops, so they have to invent this covenant stuff. Roll them.
Do not know. You don't know the individual circumstances of what's going on.
You don't have to know.
It may be the case that there are things that the individual just doesn't want to talk about it. Maybe perhaps out of respect for what's happening in the family, out of respect for the privacy of what's going on in the home.
Then don't talk
and that's
about
a privacy
it.
that you don't have any right to.
Yeah, okay. Then move back in or have a separation decree so that shows the public that you brought it to the bishop who judged it. That's what you have to do. That's following the canon law, which is based on divine law, Matthew 19:9. You cannot put away a spouse unless they're a guilty spouse, and you cannot judge your own case. And that's exactly what you're saying, Christine, that you're judging your own case. That's what everybody does because we have injected love into the legal definition of marriage, which means it cannot be judged except by your heart. That is the main problem. That's why we're all sitting here watching this. That's why the annulment revolution happened after the essence of marriage was legally or de facto changed, and everyone says now love is part of it, and legally it's not.
By the way, I've come across a lot of very judgmental Catholics, quite frankly.
That's judgmental Catholics. They are saying that you're guilty until proven innocent, and that is a Catholic position. It's not judgmental, it's just facts. Okay, like Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi can't go to communion. You're not judging them. It's just manifest. Okay. Somebody who separates without due process is a manifest adulterer, which is, a manifest abandoner, and that is adultery per Matthew 19:9. Whoever puts away a spouse, except for adultery, except for fornication, is an adulterer.
A lot of very judgmental Catholics who think that they can peer into the private lives of families of marriages that have ended up in divorce or separation and think that they can pass judgment on
I agree.
what's
In
going
some
on.
ways, it's completely stupid for people to play bishop and start judging. Oh, this spouse is innocent. This spouse is guilty. It's your fault. It's blah, blah, blah. No, the person who was the moving party is guilty until proven innocent. The person who is not the moving party is innocent until proven guilty. So I don't know what happened with you, Christine. If you are the one who bailed on the husband, then you're publicly guilty until proven innocent. And it doesn't sound like you've ever been proven innocent. There's never been a case brought. You never tried to do the case. Uh, I don't think your husband is. I don't think he'd come to the thing anyway. But at least you could publicly get that done. That's what you got to do.
You don't know what's going on. And it may be that even if the person decides to talk about the reasons for their divorce or separation, they're not revealing everything. Likely, they're not revealing everything. They're likely not revealing the most sensitive
Doesn't matter. You
information.
can't judge your own kids.
And the church makes very clear, just as I just read from the Catechism and from the Code of Canon Law, that in some situations, that separation is absolutely legitimate. Your children deserve your protection, and you're required, you have a moral obligation and duty to protect your children from abuse. You cannot allow that to continue.
Yeah, but you can't do it in private. It must be public.
And as a Catholic, the church makes clear there are some situations where you are allowed to separate until that abuse can be fixed.
Am I a broken record here? No one can judge their own separation. If you do, it's mortal, it's public sin. That's what you can't do. You have to, within 6 months, get it approved, or you got to move back home. That's what you got to do. Otherwise, marriage means nothing, and there's no wedlock, and the kids get messed up because everyone's judging their own case. Every spouse is abused. Everyone has a hard time. Get in line. Here we go.
Maybe the case that abuse can never be fixed. These are horribly difficult circumstances, and nobody's talking about, an easy way out. Nobody's talking about breaking their vows. Nobody's promoting that or one.
It does break your vows, because your vow was to live together till death, and you can't put away an innocent spouse. And if you do without permission, you are putting away an innocent spouse.
Wanting that. But in some situations, people are placed in extremely difficult circumstances where you must discern what is the wisest and the best thing to do for the good of the children, which is why you, dear audience, cannot judge. You have to refrain from judgment because you have no idea.
Like I said, the reason why she's hung up on this judgment thing is she's felt hammered on her separation and her annulment, I guess, and she's like pushing back. Okay, maybe who knows? Her husband could have been like all goofed up and had a big problem, and probably, but you can't do it internal forum. It's external forum. Separation cannot be handled in the confessional. Divorce cannot be forgiven in the confessional, and because you need public reparation. You either move back home, then you can be forgiven for the divorce. But if you're going to maintain the separation, you need to get the decree first from the local ordinary before you can be absolved. So you cannot take care of the separation / divorce in the confessional unless you move back home.
What's going on in that particular situation or that family? So my next segment coming up, Rose Sweet, to talk about this.
Rose Sweet. Again, I got to push pause.
Have you?
Okay, Christine. Rose Sweet's a piece of work. She doesn't say a whole lot of exciting things on this, mostly kind of mushy girl stuff. But I think let's just push play here for a second. I found something. We'll see what I say.
Right, and I think our will, if I want to remarry, and I pledge to take time and do it the right way and remain chaste and all that, I think that's in line with God's will.
If she wants to, after your divorce, if you want to remarry, I think that's in line with God's will. The whole problem here is most of the time there's kids, and the kids have one mom and one dad, and it's nature. And that's why the rule of thumb is if you had kids, it's valid because there's only one essential purpose to the conjugal act that's natural, and that is kids. So if you can have kids, it's valid, which is why I can't think it is God's will to remarry. You should stick with your vows. I mean, that's a little bit sticky. I got to think about that for a minute. At any rate, there's just all this rush to it's okay to move on or to remarry. I'd say 99% of the time you got to stick with your vows. Hang on.
As long as I am virtuous and centered on Him, there's a lot of choices that we can make.
Follow the canon law, follow due process, and go get your separation decree. And if you can't do that, move back home. And that's going to take care of a whole lot of stuff. I think that's a wrap for now. But anyway, the main thing I wanted to talk about was Christine Niles and all that stuff she said. It's been magical. Let's see what we can come up with later. I'll see if I can do some more videos here. And like I said, I'm super easy to reach, and I like to talk about this, obviously. So you can argue me till the cows come home on the comments. That's fine. Peace, baby.